Microphone test, microphone test.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the March 13th meeting of the City Plan Commission. I'm Alfredo Borrego. I chair this commission, and I call this meeting to order at 1:30 p.m. Commissioner Carrillo.
Yes, sir. The City Plan Commission has sole and final approval authority over subdivision maps, which is statutorily limited to a ministerial examination of the applicant's conformance to all applicable code provisions. The staff report for an agenda item may include conditions, exceptions, or modifications. The commission may approve the item with all staff report conditions, exceptions, or modifications, including additional measures regarding the item as imposed by the commission. Otherwise, the staff report with all modifications, exceptions, and conditions is approved, and the applicant shall comply with all provisions of the staff report. Commissioners will consider all agenda items other than subdivision items in the form of a public hearing. The normal process is as follows. First, the commission will hear a staff report, followed by a statement from the applicant. Then members of the public may speak, followed by any final statement from the applicant. Finally, the matter will be closed for further discussion or a motion among the commission. The commission shall then make a recommendation that will be forwarded to City Council.
Thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. Commissioners, it's very important that I let you know that when you speak to turn on your mic and put that mic close to your mouth so that everything can be recorded. All right? Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Raul Garcia, Plan Inspections. There is one change to the agenda. It's item number 5. Item 5 is to be deleted. This is to provide more time for the applicants to do a little bit more outreach with the neighbors. Whenever it is ready, notices will be resent. Renotification will happen prior to the next CPC meeting. Other than that, there are no other changes. There are 2 items on consent, and I believe there's at least 1 revised staff report.
Mr. Garcia, is that just deleted for today or postponed?
It's deleted off the agenda. Again, before it comes back on the agenda, we will re-notify to all the neighbors prior to that next, whenever it does come back to City Plan Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Commissioners, can I hear a motion to accept the changes?
Move to approve the changes as proposed.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda item changes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, we move on to the consent. Before we go there, public hearing. At this time, the City Plan Commission opens it up for a public hearing on something that's not related to the agenda, but that you would like to discuss with us. If you're on the phone, *6 to unmute. Again, public hearing. Seeing and hearing none, public hearing is closed, and we move to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second, Carrillo.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Well, all right. We now move to the regular agenda, and that would be major combination number 3. Mr. Aaron Andaluz. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Aaron Andaluz with Planning and Inspections. Nice to meet you all. So item 3 is the Gardea subdivision, a major combination application. The development is located within the city of El Paso limits. It's west of Donovan Drive and south of Country Club Road. Access to the subdivision will be from Country Club Place. The applicant is proposing to subdivide 0.92 acres into one single-family lot. Drainage will be managed by on-site ponding and is being reviewed under the current subdivision code. Here's a preliminary plat. Here's the final plat. The applicant is requesting 2 exceptions from the City Plan Commission. The first is to waive the construction of 5 feet of sidewalk to Country Club Place, and the second is to waive construction of 5.5 feet of roadway to Country Club Place. Here's the required and existing cross-sections for Country Club Place. Currently, there is no sidewalk, and the roadway is 11 feet narrower than is required. This is their proportionate share of roadway. They're requesting to waive 5 feet of sidewalk and 5.5 feet of roadway. This is to match existing conditions. These are the existing conditions for Country Club Place. The subdivision is to the west of the image on the left. The exception request to waive the required improvements meets the criteria under El Paso City Code Title 19. Staff recommends approval of Gardea subdivision on a major combination basis as it complies with Title 19 requirements. In addition, the applicant is requesting the previously mentioned exceptions. Any questions?
Can you,
Thanks.
go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Commissioner
Can you explain to
Apodaca.
us why 5.5 feet of roadway, they want an exception on that?
Because right now there isn't any, it's narrower than what is required. So if I go here, you can see that they're required to have 18 feet. Sorry, and they have, maybe this one looks a little clearer. Okay, so out of the whole thing, they're missing 11 feet. Their proportionate share would be 5 feet that's missing. And the reason they're requesting this is to match the existing conditions, which are very narrow. There's just 2 lanes going on Country Club Place. There's no sidewalk, and so that's why they're requesting this condition, exception.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go back to this so you can see.
Any other questions, Commissioners, for Mr. Andaluz?
So this is just a subdivision request because they're trying to get permits for whatever sort of development they're doing right now, right? This is kind of going back because it's an older neighborhood and it wasn't done in the past?
Yeah, Kevin Smith with Planning Inspections, correct, Commissioner Hanson. This has never been subdivided before, and so this is simply going through the subdivision process for one, I believe it's a single-family residential lot.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Andaluz. Can we hear from the applicant?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jorge Garcia with Site Work Engineering, and we're in concurrence with the staff comments.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioners, item number 3 is before us.
Move to approve with all the exceptions.
Second, Apodaca.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 3. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
All right.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we move on to number 4. For that, we have Mr. Fuentes. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Commission. Saul Fontes with Planning and Inspections. Item 4 on the agenda involves Wagner subdivision involving a major combination application. Here's an aerial view of the development. This development is within city limits and it is located west of Zaragoza Road and south of Montana Avenue. Here we have the aerial view showing the subdivision superimposed. The applicant is proposing to subdivide 93.3 acres of land into 4 commercial lots and 2 ponding sites. Lots range from 1.16 acres to 49.66 acres. The applicant will also be dedicating the extension of John Haynes Street, and stormwater drainage will be conveyed to retention basins located within the subdivision. Access to the subdivision shall be from Zaragoza Road, Montana Avenue, and John Haynes Street. Here we have an image of the preliminary plat. Here we have an image of the final plat. The applicant is requesting 3 exceptions pursuant to the El Paso City Code. Number 1 is to waive the construction of 1 foot of sidewalk along Zaragoza Road. Number 2 is to waive the construction of 6 feet of sidewalk along Montana Avenue. And number 3 is to allow Block 1 to have a length in excess of 1,600 feet and a block perimeter in excess of 2,400 feet. Here we have the required and proposed cross-sections for Zaragoza Road. The required and proposed cross-sections again. And here we have the existing conditions on Zaragoza Road. Again, the exceptions are to match existing conditions. Here we have the required and proposed cross-section for Montana Avenue. The required and proposed cross-section again. And here we have the existing conditions on Montana Avenue. Again, it's to match existing conditions on the property. So the exception requests meet the criteria under El Paso City Code Title 19. And the third exception request to exceed the allowed block length and block perimeter also meets the criteria under El Paso City Code Title 19. To conclude, staff recommends approval of Wagner subdivision on a major combination basis. And in addition, the applicant is requesting the previously discussed exceptions. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuentes. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Fuentes? Mr. Uribe, Commissioner.
Is the applicant going to pave John Hayes Street and complete the street per city code?
Yes, they will be improving that street, yes.
If I might, Kevin Smith, the plan inspections, my understanding is for a portion, they'll be constructing their proportionate share, as this is an arterial roadway, so for a portion, the large portion of it, they'll be constructing their proportionate share, which is half the roadway. The abutting property owner will be responsible for the other half when they come in to develop.
So what you're saying is if they're going to do half, it's going to have sidewalks, curb, and half a street?
Correct, and that's per the subdivision requirements.
Not the full street for both ways?
No, it's not the responsibility of the subdivider. As the thoroughfare plan goes, abuts the 2 properties, they're responsible for their half. The other property owner is responsible for theirs. It's their proportionate share.
Okay, so then let's do a scenario here. You're coming in from Montana, you hang a right on that new street, okay? And one side will be paved and the other one will be dirt?
Again, the other half has not been built or dedicated, so they work with our land development department as to the design to make sure it could accommodate traffic both ways at this time.
Commissioner Massoud?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, from our experience, this has been the common practice. We've been doing this for years and years, over 30 years, So because you only have control over the land that is adjacent to your property, you can dedicate that half and improve it. So you have no ownership and you cannot dedicate the other half opposite to that. So you only do your half. Versus the existing condition is probably only a 20-foot double penetration road right now. So whatever you're doing right now is far better than what already is existing.
but that's only half.
And this is per subdivision requirements as well.
Okay. Any other question? Commissioner Uribe?
Do you mind bringing out the drawing again of the road? So, no, the design. So,
Oh, this one?
no, next one. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Right. So I see the entrance of John Hayes is entirely on his property, but I see the entire road on his property in that drawing. So, so the way this drawing shows, the entire street is on his property, correct?
I believe the applicant can further illuminate and correct
Okay.
some statements.
Hold on. Any more questions for Mr. Fuentes? Because I have one.
I wanted to ask, for the Montana sidewalks, whatever decision we come up with, it's still up to TxDOT, right?
Correct. Montana's TxDOT right away.
So, speaking on sidewalks, those two sides will have sidewalks except Montana. And according to our backup, you gave us a backup where it calls for the city G4 sustainable walking. So if you're walking through Zaragoza, come to Montana, then there won't be sidewalk. Same thing with the new road, John Haynes. If you get to Montana, there won't be no sidewalk, correct?
Correct. I mean, that is to the discretion of the City Plan Commission if they wish to approve the exceptions that the applicant is requesting.
So
Any other quick, Commissioner Uribe?
I do want to comment because I'm familiar with both properties here, and the other future properties to be dedicating the road is an old junk, is contaminated, it's going to be very expensive to clean. So I don't see the other half ever being built, and John Hayes is an important street in my opinion, and we do need that access to alleviate the traffic, so it's just my opinion.
Again, I think the applicant can further clarify some comments that I made, so I'd like to
Okay.
defer some of that to John Hayes.
Any more questions to Mr. Fuentes? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Can we hear from the applicant?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jorge Escarte with CA Group for the record. I wanted to interject earlier because so y'all don't divert on the discussion about John Hayes, but we're building the entire width of John Hayes from Zaragoza all the way to Montana.
2 lanes going each way.
It is, I think
Or,
you're
I
going to
mean, 1 lane each way.
No. It's, I think, 2 lanes in each direction with a landscape raised median and a bike lane as per the bike plan.
On John Haynes.
That's right, as part of the MTP. We've already coordinated with TxDOT. We're right now in the process of working with them on the access, and it goes in front of the Access Committee tomorrow.
Okay. Any other questions? I have one. Sidewalk, Montana.
Sidewalk right now, TxDOT is in the process of widening Montana. So we've been in discussions about, they want additional possibly right-of-way to expand Montana. As you know, right now, I think currently the project ends around Rich Beam, if I'm not mistaken, the phase 1. So I think this is part of phase 2 to take it all the way up past Montana, past the overpass to Whiten, Montana. So we've been in discussions back and forth with the TxDOT design team. They have dollars already identified. I just don't know when it goes to construction. That's something that TxDOT controls. As part of their improvements, they're putting sidewalks. So anything that we do, they go in there and demolish it. So if we put in sidewalks right now, we're just incurring their costs because now a contractor is going to charge them to demolish concrete that just recently got constructed.
Appreciate it.
No,
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
No, thank you.
See none, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, number 4 is before us.
Motion to approve? Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 4. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Man, that's only 20 minutes and we're already into other business. All right, we move into other business. Mr. Ablin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting our annual legal training for the board. All right, so this is our legal training for 2025. So at the City of El Paso, we have two types of boards. We have advisory boards, which are going to be the majority of your boards at the city. And then we have decision-making boards, which City Plan Commission is. And there's very few boards in the city that are decision-making boards. And there comes a heightened level of responsibility with a decision-making board. A lot of these items, right, there's shot clocks on. They get, if they're not heard in a certain amount of time on decision-making boards, they get automatically approved. So quorum and things like that become increasingly important on decision-making boards so that we can ensure that the city's business is able to be conducted in a timely manner. So specifically here at City Plan Commission, primarily what you all do is make recommendations on zoning items, and those recommendations go to city council, who either decides to approve or deny, go against that recommendation. And they do take very seriously y'all's recommendations on zoning items. I think it's very, it's not, they don't give you all a rubber stamp, but they take it very seriously. And when they're deliberating and discussing an item, CPC's recommendation is almost always brought up. So they do, listen to you all and take a high value of your opinion on those items. The other items would be subdivision items, and you all are the final authority on subdivision items, so those don't go to City Plan Commission. As we know with subdivision items, they're kind of a double-edged sword, right? You all are the final authority on them, but your authority is extremely limited on subdivision items. They require, state law requires mandatory approval of these subdivision items unless there is a state law or a local code requirement that the subdivision doesn't meet. So planning and inspections does a really good job to vet those items and make sure when they bring them to you that there aren't any issues, that they comply with state and local laws. Although we do see occasionally, right, on subdivision items where there's exceptions under our code, and so you all do have the final authority to grant those exceptions, right? So if you decide to give an exception or deny an exception, that doesn't go to City Council. That is y'all's decision. So just Chapter 2.04 of the El Paso City Code. This is all boards are subject to this. Excessive absences. Luckily, we have a great board here, and we don't really have the quorum issues that we sometimes do see on other city boards. But after 3 consecutive meeting absences, the mayor or city council member who appointed you may remove you. Record-keeping requirements. So as a decision-making board, you all are definitely subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act. And as part of the Texas Open Meetings Act, minutes are required to be kept and filed with the clerk. You all are subject to terms, right? You all are appointed for a certain term. Generally under our code, holding over is prohibited, and the maximum is 30 days after a term expires, except for decision-making boards. The state law says that decision-making boards, a member can hold over for over 30 days, almost indefinitely. By practice and policy, right, we don't want somebody holding over indefinitely. But if somebody has not been appointed and there's an issue and we can't get somebody appointed, a member can hold over. And again, the reasoning behind that is so that the city business can continue on these decision-making boards. And then, so role of the city attorney's office and role of staff, city manager's office or staff. So my role here is to advise the board as a whole. I don't advise you individual members.
Excuse me, Russell. Excuse me, we have a hot mic. Can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
So, I can't advise you all on your grievances with each other or your neighbors, but I can answer questions to the board as a whole. I monitor the board to minimize risk of liability for the city. Make sure the board's not doing anything illegal or outside the bounds, and monitor the board is in compliance with applicable law. Staff, they provide resources for you all. They, make sure all the presentations get here, make sure all the items are posted, make sure we're complying with TOMA. They coordinate with you all between the board and council. If you all have, a specific item that you'd like to see to go to council, they assist you with that. And they ensure that the board receives and follows council directions and assignments. So, occasionally we do code updates and things like that, and council will identify an objective or something they want to see that you all look to, and so they coordinate with staff to get that to you all. And so where to start, if you're looking at the board and you want to know more about the board, than my quick presentation, or I know staff does a great job and provides you with most of this, and they do a good job of onboarding and training. But you'll look at the enabling ordinance for City Plan Commission, which is in Title 19. There's also bylaws for the City Plan Commission. Title II of the El Paso City Code has a lot of information on boards in general. And then specifically, Texas Local Government Code, chapters 211 and 212. 211 is our state code for zoning items, and 212 is our state code for subdivision items. And a lot of our El Paso City Code mirrors the state code. So Title 19 is going to be subdivisions. That's going to be 212. And Title 20 is our city zoning code, which corresponds with 211. And so the Texas Open Meetings Act, we always want to cover the Texas Open Meetings Act as more than an advisory board and a decision-making board. The Texas Open Meetings Act is very, very clear that this board is subject to it. And the reasoning is that we want, in Texas, it's a very important that, public business is done open and available to the public, and part of that is, we stream the meetings online. Notice is posted 72 hours in advance with all the items. When the items are posted, there's a threshold of a description that a member of the public could, see that and read that item and generally understand what the topic discussed is going to be. And as again, it's to make government decision-making accessible to the public, and it's liberally construed in favor of the open government. And so, that means whenever possible and all possible, we make the meetings open to the public. Everything's done on the record. Nothing's done behind closed doors. That's why we have the microphones. You all aren't discussing between yourselves, follow Robert's Rules of Order and discussion. And that's so the public knows what's going on. The notice requirement, as I said, the Texas Open Meetings Act requires us to post the date and hour of the meeting, the location of the meeting, the subject matter of the meeting or items on the meeting, and that has to be posted 72 hours before the meeting. It's required to be posted out front here in City Hall, and it's also, because the city has a website, it's required to be posted on the website, the agenda, so the public has that information available. Minutes required. They must prepare and keep minutes or make a recording of each open meeting. There's requirement for minutes. They must state the subject of the discussion, indicate each vote, order, decision, or action taken. public comment, right? So we have items that are more routine items and there aren't public comment, but then there are items that are required to be public comment, most items. And so public comment must allow the public to speak on agenda items before or during discussion of that item. We may have a reasonable rule to limit speakers' length of time. It's usually 3 minutes for pretty much every board and city council, and it may require members of the public to sign up for public comment. So we allow public comment on those items that are subject to public comment, and then there's also an item that allows general public comment at the beginning of each meeting. Closed meeting, executive session. I don't ever recall that there's been an executive session item for City Plan Commission. And when you look at the Texas Open Meetings Act, it really says that executive session is primarily for the governing body. And it would be, so that's City Council. So it would be a really limited exception where we would bring an executive session item to this board. So we want everything done in public as much as possible. And that's why it's so limited. City Council has the ability to go into executive session on all kinds of things, employment issues, real estate purchases, things like that. But a board like this, the executive session item would really only be, the exception would be consultation with the attorney. And in my experience, we've never had an executive session item here on this board. But, you must convene an open session first, must identify an open session, the legal provision allowing for the closed meeting. And so that would be consultation with an attorney, right? CPC's not gonna go in under the exception for personnel matters. And notice requirements still apply. And then when you go into executive session meeting, the deliberation is done in the meeting, and then the vote is done out in the public. Ethics, we always try to cover the city's ethics code. So public officials have a fiduciary responsibility to manage and maintain taxpayers' funds. So that's a general fiduciary. And the most important thing in this, and our city ethics code, which I believe is entitled to also, it includes acting with the highest degree of honesty, loyalty, and good faith, and managing another's money or property. And here, right, we're doing the city's business. So that's, again, why we follow the Texas Open Meetings Act, why we do everything in public. Why you all are responsible if you have some sort of personal interest or conflict of interest to recuse yourself, to make sure that you're being responsible for fiduciaries with the responsibility that you all have as officers of the city. And so, our ethics code, again, is in 2.92. And again, as board members of the city, you all are officers of the city, and officers are subject to the ethics code just as employees or city council. And I think it says what our code is, that being ethical means a duty to the citizens and fulfilling the responsibility of your position. And at the very least, that means being disposed to comply with all laws that applies to one's position, state and local laws, and shall not recklessly disregard the established duties assigned to the officer and employee. Now, we've never had that issue with this board, but there have been instances in the city where a board has done something against the advice of the city attorney's office. In that situation, it had to go to city council, and city council directed that board to reverse their decision. And they did that, but by the time that was done, it was already too late because that person had received a decision for the board. So it ended up into a lawsuit and causing the city a lot of money. So, it's extremely important to follow that ethics code. Personal liability, we always talk about ultra vires actions. Ultra vires is Latin for don't do it. No, it's outside of your authority. So acts of committee members without legal authority beyond their granted authority. So you all have a limited authority. You give advice and advise on zoning matters, and you're the final decision maker on subdivision items within that authority. So, if you go outside of that authority, that would be called an ultra vires act. And, like that board did, they went outside of the city's authority. And even though under an ultra vires act, that person's personally liable, and not protected under the city protections, they may get sued individually, but even though, it's something they did against city's advice, it always affects the city, and the city always ends up getting sued and dragged into the situation also. So just to keep that in mind. I think that's it for me. Any questions?
Commissioners, this is the time to ask the questions. Don't get yourselves in trouble. I have Commissioner Hanson.
Can you give us some more details on that specific case you were talking about?
Not really.
You can't? Okay.
I have one.
Yes.
When you post the agenda for the CPC meetings, it calls for this room. We had an instance last year where we had a lot of public speakers, and we were hoping that this room could not handle them.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big issue. So I was hoping we could use council chambers, but they said we couldn't. So would that violate the place of meeting if we would come here and there would be a lot of public speakers and we needed a bigger venue than what we have here?
So I think it's kind of a gray area, and I looked into it at the time. And what I found, and I think that might have been more of a scheduling issue on moving, you don't want to do it if possible, but if it's in the same building, I believe that it's okay. And again, it's kind of a gray area, so, if possible, we don't want to do it. But I believe, it is allowed if it's in the same building.
Okay. And the reason I asked is because all the people, well, a lot of the people, most of the people that wanted to speak were being held in council chambers and then funneled up here, supposedly 10 at a time, and moved 10. So that was my question, but I think you answered it. Thank you. Commissioner Massoud.
Yes, I have a question, I guess, relates to incidents where I've been involved with conflict of interest. In my case, I sometimes represent cases. What is the stand on that? I'm sure I have to recuse myself, but could I present the case at least?
So I think under 2.94, I'm not sure which section it is, but we can probably provide you with it. It says that somebody on the board shall not appear before the board with business.
So in other words, no?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Carrillo.
Can I ask you about legal liability? In our packets, it says with every zoning, it says a zoning ordinance is to promote the health, safety, welfare of the city. And these are recommendations we make, but the exceptions do hold, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we legally liable if we do anything to harm the health and safety of the city, even in the long term, if these issues compound, or if we give special preference for exceptions to high-income areas, majority-white areas? These things add up. Are we legally liable? Is the city staff legally liable, or applicants legally liable, or does nobody have liability for these issues?
Well, I don't think there's a majority white area in all of El Paso.
Well, I mean, like the issues, the areas where it's highest.
To answer your question, I think it would be very hard. You all make these decisions to the best of your ability on a case-by-case basis. So, you know, bad decisions compounding over time, you know, is an issue, but you look at it on a case-by-case basis in, you know, in conformance with the comprehensive plan and things like that. So I think, you know, you have a wide amount of discretion in that. And again, you're only a recommending body too, so it's only a recommendation. And then when council makes their final decision, they have what is known as legislative authority or legislative protection. I'm probably not thinking of the exact term, but you know, our elected officials have a certain amount of authority and protection under the law to make these decisions.
And so just the follow-up, if we make a decision and our rationale is to preserve the health and safety of the community, and are we held liable to the applicant if this stops the project, for instance?
No, you all have the discretion to make those decisions. You know, when a rezoning or a zoning item comes in, zoning isn't a right. Zoning, you know, when you buy a property and you have it at the zoning that it is at the time, and if, you know, an applicant has a big project coming and, you know, their project is, their property is residential and they want commercial, well, you know, it's residential and not commercial and they're not entitled to that. That's a decision for city council. And, you know, they make that investment based on a risk that city council may not approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I do have one. So when there are such contentious issues like number 5 today, that they end up, you know, being postponed so long, there are collaborative solutions rather than kind of compromises that I'm not sure. I guess, okay, the sidewalks one that was downtown that we voted to just delete the parking, I don't totally remember, but it was something that the applicant hadn't asked for. And we were like, hey, I think there's a solution to this that's different than what you're asking for. Would you like this? Are we allowed, like, what are the boundaries for that?
I don't know, Philip, if you...
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. I don't recall, I know you've had before you several exceptions and waivers, but I don't recall which one you were referring to, which is the parking or something like that. So
It was the one next to Bowie Bakery. And we just, like, they were asking for a parking reduction and we were like, you don't have to have parking at all.
So when we bring parking reduction to you, and we say sometime, you know, 50%, you know, 100%, the idea is because parking was still a requirement, and that's the reason we bring it to you, so you can waive the parking. In this case, I think, you know, your decision at that time was, well, you really don't need the parking, so you can do 100%. I think that's the one you're referring to do 100%. I think, you know, I'm not a legal mind, I'm just a planner, but I think, you know, you had the right to do so at that time.
Yeah, I believe so. I don't recall exactly, but I can look at it. You know, I think staff encourages the applicants to work with the neighborhood as much as possible. And we see that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we also want to treat applicants, you know, fairly and equally as possible. So that's, you know, something you want to consider. You know, if you ask an applicant, you know, to do something extra, are you asking all applicants to do that? Why are you asking that? And I think we've had discussions about that, and, you know, it's there's no perfect answer for it, and it's something that, you know, is debatable, and I think you all do debate that and discuss those difficult issues and come to good decisions.
I'm asking because, and it sounds like your answer is, there is no specific rule about this, there's no specific rule saying that you can't do this, but are we allowed to say, hey, I think this is a solution that works better for the people involved that y'all haven't asked for? Would you like this instead of the variances that you're asking for?
Maybe if I can try answering it, is in your packet for each item, you have 3 options. You can approve with modifications, or deny. So that's with there. I think that may fall under the second one, where it may not be exactly what the applicant is looking for, but again, like on these items, you're recommending body to council. So if your recommendation is different than the request, that would get passed along to city council for their consideration.
Okay, so we are allowed to make a different modification.
Correct. That also includes conditions as well.
Okay.
So often conditions come before like a rezoning. Those are staff recommendations. You sometimes agree with those conditions. Sometimes you can not agree appropriately.
If I may, it's important to follow the agenda and what's in the agenda. And the case where we're talking about that parking issue, it was staff that recommended and said, hey, you can also do this, and that's how we followed that one. This is also allowed, because we didn't do it, we didn't know it at the time, so we followed staff, and staff says, within this agenda item, you can do this, and that's what we did on that one.
And I think also, we don't want to do a blanket approach. You have to take each case on a case-by-case basis. Each one is different, each one maybe has different circumstances, so you have to weigh those and then make the appropriate recommendation.
I'll give you an example. Just the last one we heard on Montana. The gentleman says, hey, whatever we build there, TxDOT's going to knock it down because they already have plans for this and that. So, okay. You know, on the sidewalks. Because if you know, I want sidewalks. And I was thinking, hey, let's make sure they have sidewalks there so it's available to everybody. But when the applicant came and says, we've already talked about it with TxDOT, this and that, that convinced me, okay, fine, I know how to vote.
So, Mr. Chair, what's the rationale on the case before that, where we granted an exception on sidewalks in the Upper Valley?
And the Lower Valley? Oh, which one? The one last 2 weeks ago? Yeah. On that one, I'm glad you brought that up. Because that one, they had already established sidewalks on North Loop. And just the other day, in fact, yesterday, I went by to make sure that I was correct. And they had already established the sidewalks on North Loop and curved them into that cul-de-sac across and on the other side. Okay? So in other words, that's moving forward. Same thing with Montana. Once TxDOT comes in, puts a sidewalk, that's moving forward.
I think if I could just add to the exception, they are not a guarantee.
Right.
They are they're asking for like a waiver. I don't have to do this.
We got 3.
Each.
On our backup, we got 3 choices to make, and the staff makes a recommendation on A, B, or C. That's a recommendation to the CPC, and then from there, we decide. Again, like Mr. Smith said, it's a case by case. But sometimes it's important so that CPC sets the long-term vision. Questions? Comments? This is the time to ask. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you all, I appreciate it.
Our next presenter on drainage and arroyos, we have Mr. Oscar Villalobos with a capital improvement. Mr. Villalobos.
Oscar, if you can unmute your microphone. There you go.
All right. Again, Oscar Villalobos with Plan and Inspections. I'm going to be doing a presentation on stormwater management and how it impacts arroyos. So So what is the purpose of stormwater management? So the purpose is to protect, maintain, and enhance the public health, safety, environment, and general welfare of the citizens of El Paso, Texas, and the ETJ. And this is achieved by establishing minimum requirements and procedures to control the adverse effects of increased stormwater runoff and associated with new and redevelopments. So how do we regulate this? We regulate this by establishing decision-making procedures surrounding private and public land development activities that protect the integrity of the watershed, by establishing minimum post-development stormwater management standards and design criteria, and by encouraging the use of non-structural stormwater management, such as the preservation of green spaces and other conservation areas such as natural arroyos. So where does the stormwater runoff go? This is a question that we as the city officials, when we get plans for review, we always ask that. You guys always ask that to the applicants. So for developments, new and redevelopments, we request that the developer maintain the pre-development hydrologic response in their post-development state as nearly as practical in order to reduce flooding. And this is by not increasing the stormwater runoff and to see if the development is part of a master drainage plan. And if not, of course, that development will be entitled to on-site funding. Also, the drainage plan shall be detailed on how stormwater runoff will be controlled or managed by providing calculations and a drainage report to meet the criteria set forth on the DDM or drainage design manual. So what's a master drainage plan? A master drainage plan is a comprehensive long-term strategy for managing stormwater runoff and addressing drainage problems within a specific area. This master drainage plan is included as part of a drainage study and is submitted as part of the land study for new developments. Here you can see an example of, these are the old master drainage plans that we have. We use this in case where we see a development or an area that is already well established, and you see some infill development, so we refer these drainage master drainage plans for a review, just to let us know if the question that we ask about where does the water go, we need to make sure that if the applicant is saying that it goes to a certain regional pond, is to verify that that pond has a capacity or is a part of a master drainage plan. Here you can see a more recent one as part of a drainage study, which this is a larger area and with different larger watersheds. So as part of all requirements and the drainage design requirements, the city of El Paso has the criteria that the drainage structures needs to be designed per 100-year storm. For those of you that doesn't have an engineering background, 100-year storm it doesn't mean that it's a storm that's gonna happen every 100 years. That most people don't get that, but it's just basically a percentage. You can see here on the table on your right, you have return frequencies 1, 2, 5, 50, 100, and up to 500. So that's basically the percentage. Let's say, for example, on the 100, that means that a rain has a probability of 1% of chance happening of occurring in a given year. So, for example, the 500-year will be 0.2% of that storm happening. A 10-year storm will be 10% of a storm with an intensity of within 24 hours. And you can see here you have the 24 hours, and then you will give you a frequency or intensity. You have the numbers. You can see the 3.354. So that means that, and this is for the central area. So let's say on the central area we get a storm, and the water will accumulate to, or we have 3.3 3.38 inches of rain, that's considered to be a 100-year storm. This differs on different areas of El Paso. We have for Central, we have one for the west, and also for the east side. These tables are different for each areas, but like I said, the El Paso design criteria is that the drainage structures must be designed as per the 100-year storm. And also, as part of our review, we get developments that sometimes there's an arroyo there on the development. So what's an arroyo? An arroyo is a dry riverbed or seasonally active creek where they're usually found in desert or other arid climates, typically dry but get filled and carry storm water during raining season. Here's just an example of an arroyo here with in El Paso. More pictures of other examples of arroyos, of course, when they're dry and then when they're carrying storm water. And so how are they formed? Natural arroyos are made through the process known as arroyo cutting. Also, when heavy rains and flash floods cut through the dry ground, creating ravines. And also by erosion. Water and gravity erodes loose soil, especially in areas with little vegetation to hold the soil in place. And also when you're doing grading, by removing natural or native vegetation for new developments. Here you can see an example of a slope that is starting to erode. Of course, this by the time it passes, this will eventually become an arroyo, just because of the erosion that's happening there. Here's just examples of arroyos that we have. For those of you that went to UTED, you're familiar with this arroyo. This was modified to carry storm water and, of course, allowed the development at UTED. So arroyos in new developments. City officials are intending to reduce scouring and modifications and try to preserve the natural conditions as much as possible, especially on mountain development. If being used as part of a stormwater management for the development, arroyo shall be preserved in the natural state, except that an exception of such requirement may be granted by this commission. They are usually untouched and labeled as open spaces, but are also channelized to allow development. Drainage study, when we have a new development, a drainage study will need to be submitted to ensure best stormwater management practices and avoid creating new arroyos that could potentially cause property damage or flooding. Here we have a picture of an aerial view of the west side of Paso. This is, I think, on the 90s. You can see that there were several arroyos going through this area. And this is on recent, when, after development came, those arroyos were channelized to allow for development. Some of these arroyos are designated as floodways by FEMA. So FEMA defines the floodplain as any land area susceptible to being inundated by floodwaters from any source. And a regulatory floodway is a specific area within a floodplain, usually along a river or stream, that must be kept free from obstruction to ensure floodwaters can flow freely without causing a significant increase in water level. FEMA regulates floodways to ensure that they remain clear of obstructions so that floodwaters can pass through. And like I mentioned right now, some arroyos can be designated as floodways by FEMA. Here we have an example of an arroyo. You can see when a small rain comes, that's what you typically will see. But when you get a 100-year storm, this is the actual floodplain. So that means that when this area will get a 100-year storm, the water level will go up to what you can see. So as part of our review, also, we're the floodplain management officials. So the City of El Paso is part of the NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program, and it's which is a community-based effort to reduce the risk of flooding and managed by the floodplain administrator, which in this case, we are the floodplain administrators. And the City of El Paso reviews all developments applications that could affect the floodplain to ensure they meet the state and country requirements. and that all developments in the floodplain requires permits. And here's just an example of a typical flood map. You can see where you have the arrow. That's a regulatory floodway. As I mentioned right now, on these areas, pretty much development can happen because you cannot affect that arroyo in any way. And also you have the 100-year flood zone. The orange will be the 500-year flood zone. And the number that you see, it's the base flood elevation, or BFE, which that helps us on the review when we get the developments on the floodplain. So in summary, arroyos are more typical in arid regions with lower precipitation, but where flash flood happens. Arroyos are usually natural, but can be modified for stormwater management purposes and all development. And as the city officials, our intent is to reduce carrying and modification and try to preserve the natural condition as much as possible. And as the floodplain administrators, we are responsible for implementing a community's local floodplain regulation, ensuring compliance with federal flood insurance program standards, and enforcing any local imposed higher standards to minimize flood risk and protect public safety. And with this, I conclude my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any question that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Commissioners, questions? No? Really? You guys already knew it all? Let me say, we talk about arroyos. I've always known the arroyos to be from downtown west. That's where you see the arroyos. On the eastern slopes of the Franklin Mountains, many years ago, we covered those arroyos, which led to the desert floor and then south towards the river, because all the water conveys into the Rio Grande. Okay? And my question is Central El Paso and all the issues we have when it rains. It hardly ever rains in El Paso. You know, we're dry, very dry. But when it does rain, the real issues start in Central El Paso. The rest of the city, yeah, it doesn't have flooded too much unless we had those rains from, I think, 2011, where it rained all over, right? Days and days, months and months. But it's Central El Paso that always worries me, because we have a few sections, the one right below the mountain, and then a little bit east, and then South Central, like right around Bassett Center, and how all that water conveys, you know, and those are not arroyos, but in modern times, those are arroyos made by us, by the city, to convey all that water back into the Rio Grande. And that's just it. But besides that, my question, and we saw it last time we were here, is why some businesses are required to retain their own water and some businesses don't. And you said at the beginning, if you could bring your screen up, I think it was the first or second one, where, oh, no, back one? Or another one, where it says that if you redevelop a business, you have to retain your own water, correct?
So, and it says this here, on new developments and redevelopments, it's, the developer is responsible to maintain their post-development state as nearly as practical in order to reduce flooding. And I mentioned it right now, whenever we see an application, we looked at and see if that's a part of a master drainage plan that came in, you know, back in the day or a few years back. So if that's part of a drainage, master drainage plan, that means that area was already, you know, calculated to, or let's say, like you're mentioning right now, to be able to send that stormwater runoff into the street, or if you need to keep it on your on site. The master drainage plan will be the one dictating if it allows it to be discharged into the street, or if it needs to be on-site pond on site. Another contribution to this, and I think, because I looked at CPC last week on the project that you were asking, also it depends on the type of soil that you have. For example, for mountain development, the coefficient that you have there, which means that when it rains, how much a percentage of the water will percolate, through the soil or not. On mountain development, the coefficient is 0.95, which means that only 5% of the water will percolate, all the other water will go through. So on these scenarios, it doesn't make any difference if they're retaining it, or if they're discharging into the street, because even if on the pre-development conditions, that's what is actually happening. The water is just coming down the mountain and going its way. And you mentioned it right now on the mountain that you have these arroyos. It's because pretty much it's formed because the water is not able to percolate and just continue its way down. But like I said, it will depend on the master drainage plan. If it's part of a master drainage plan, we will look at it and we will make a determination if development has to be on-site ponding, or if it's allowed to discharge the what is called the historic flow, which means that when you have an area that hasn't been developed, like I mentioned right now, when it rains, some water stays there, some water goes through. When you come with your development, you're generating more runoff. So on these areas, only the historic flow is what allows to be discharged on the street. The other you have to be, or has to be kept on site.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Any other questions? Comments?
Just one question, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, Mr. Villalobos, about how many master drainage plans you have within the city. I'm not saying about the new land studies that are on the outskirts, but within the older parts of the city, how many approximately you guys have already that you fall back on to see if it does already?
I don't have an exact number. We have pretty much the area for El Paso. I don't know when these maps were implemented, but it's pretty much for the city limits. And then at the time of when that drainage study was made, like you mentioned right now, some of those are newer that we have received, but I wouldn't have an exact number of how many of those we have.
So like the one you presented here, that looked to me that is
That's
close.
just a panel. We have panels for the whole city limits.
Like that was a downtown area?
No, this was on I think on Zaragoza and I-10 around that area.
Okay. So in those land studies, and I know I've come across those, let's just say it's a 200-acre land study, and it has already the coefficients, the flows, and eventually it goes into one regional ponding area where the water covers that whole 200 acres. And then you have a client who wants to develop 2 acres within the 200 acres, and we come in with a grading plan and we show that we're going to fully develop it, like 0.95 coefficient. The whole thing was going to be paved. But then you look at your plan and you say, you know what, when it was done, this was done for 0.65 coefficient, so you have to retain the difference. Am I right? So I'm just doing that for clarification. So you still, even if you do have a land study, you still may have to pond a portion that it wasn't accounted for in the regional pond size.
And also this happens, for example, in rezonings. Let's say you have a master drainage plan that is showing an area that was to be residential, and then they came in and rezoned that to be commercial, like Commissioner Massoud mentioned. The coefficient for that would change, so the developer will be responsible to retain that difference between the residential and commercial.
Exactly. So you still get a break by letting the difference between residential at 0.5 and the commercial at 0.95, you know, the difference you have to pond, and the rest you can just let onto the street to go.
Any other questions, comments? What I do know is that all the drainage in the El Paso region was done by the Army Corps of Engineers. And to this day, the city still uses those studies. In fact, a couple years ago, we just did another one with them. and they presented to us for the central part. And in other words, what was done back then, and I-10 came in, we used those old maps to run the arroyos and the water conveyance throughout the east side, west side, and whatnot. But because we've grown as a city and we built on top of those water conveyance things, we need to relook at that. And what we found out this last time is that some of our city streets become the arroyos. So, and I'm speaking mainly of central El Paso.
Right, and also, and again, Commissioner Masood may also contribute to this because he's been in the business longer. But the drainage criteria has changed. Back then it was different, which it was a lesser requirement, or now it's more stringent than what was before. These tables, for example, the one that I show right now, they change, some often. And back then it was just a different design criteria. That with time, based on studies and all that, they see that those criteria need to be changed, and that's because those areas are designed as per all their standards that we have right now.
All right. Questions, concerns? None?
Standards as in inaccurate maps, or as in not having to do the 100-year storm, but the 50-year storm and a different coefficient?
Right. For example, right now, like I mentioned, our design criteria calls for a 100-year storm. Back then it was for a 50-year storm, which will make a difference. The streets, if you have a street that was designed as, for example, TxDOT only uses, I think, a 25-year storm. They designed these streets as for a 25-year storm. So if we get a 100-year storm, those streets will not be able to handle the amount of water that's going to be receiving. So on these areas, those streets were designed as per lower standards.
But either way, when you submit your design as a designer, you account for all these discrepancies. So you basically see what you're generating. Let's say you're generating 100. And already in the old map that used older criteria and lesser years, you take only credit for whatever they allowed there, and you retain the difference.
So if you're downstream from whatever was developed in the 60s, you have to essentially fix whatever they didn't do that wouldn't be up to
That would be
standard.
considered historical. Anything coming to you from upstream, the only thing you're required to do is to pass it through safely. You're not obligated to retain it. You're only obligated to retain what your property generates, whatever falls on it.
And when we talk about retain, I know that ponds have a certain time of percolating, but what about streets? Like, how long does the water have to be out of the street? Or what is the requirement for that?
I think it's 24 hours that you guys account for, what we account
No,
for.
for street, no, we have that will come as per the engineering design. Usually they will provide that, what's called a time of concentration. So that means that is calculated by saying you have a property, and the drop of water that falls on the farther side of the property will have a time to go from that point to the discharge point, which is the street or an inlet or what so. So you will have a time for that, and the engineer will provide that for you. And with that, you can be able to see if their proposed structures have the capacity to handle the amount of water that is going through, the streets.
So is there a maximum time of concentration?
No,
no,
but
that's mentioned.
that will affect, of course, you can have a larger, time of concentration. That would affect the whole design of the project. So.
It's distance variance. You calculate it based on the distance that the water has to travel.
But there are some areas in El Paso, again, south central El Paso, where when it rains, that water sticks around for quite a while, and other areas, it just runs down to those areas. And I know that the city's working on that, especially the area right there on Piedras and Copia and the I-10, how the stormwater came in and built those huge areas and pumped them out. Also in the Saipan area where the Spaghetti Bowl is, they knocked those houses down and made a park. The park is not really a park, it's a pond, but then when it reaches a certain level, it's pumped out to the river. You know, so it's mainly south central El Paso that retains water. Everything flows there. Because it's
For the same reason that Mr. Villalobos just explained, that the older areas, of course, would have been designed with older standards and more frequent storm, or, you know, lesser frequency. Basically, maybe designed for 50-year storms instead of 100. So yes, you will notice that under, you know, severe storms.
Well, I don't know about 100 or 50-year storms. I know that when it really pours, that place gets flooded. And we just haven't had any water for the last few years, but when it really rains, those areas get really bad. El Paso Drive and Paisano gets really bad. You know, the areas over there by below Fox Plaza, Southern Fox Plaza, and all those areas get really flooded. And I know that they're working on them, but they've always been working on them. Ever since I was a kid, they've always been working on them.
Yeah,
it's just that it's so low. It's just too low.
The other thing that we need to consider also that, you know, the weather for El Paso is very, you know, it's not typical. So in the table that I show right now, for the 100-year story, it's based on a 24-hour frequency. But you know how El Paso it is. Those are 3 inches that I mentioned right now. They will pour in 30 minutes, not within 24 hours, and that, of course, affects all the infrastructure out there.
Right. Any more questions, concerns? Mr. Villalobos?
I just want to comment that in itself, like that rain comes in 3 minutes. So we're putting all this concrete infrastructure in to accommodate what's coming in 3 minutes. So that's an argument for should we be planning for 100-year storms versus the 24-hour storms. And I'm not saying here nor there, but that's just a comment that like engineers are balancing that difference. So.
But sometimes it depends where the storm is. If the storm comes in over the mountain, I mean, there's a lot of water that's going to run through the central part of El Paso all the way down. If the storm comes in away from the mountain, then the streets capture it and run it off. And I've seen it when it rained over Bassett Center. The cars were rocking because of the rain. 30, 45 minutes later, there was no water. It all conveyed out, which was really good.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. But sometimes when it rains from the mountain, I mean, it's different.
Yes, then also, just for information, it only takes 6 inches of water to be able to carry a small car. So you'll see that, you know, the street is flooded. You better think twice before you're going into that street.
Okay. Seeing no more comments, Mr. Villalobos, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Commissioners, brings us to the end.
Motion to adjourn.
Take yours as a second.
I have a motion to adjourn, but I didn't hear a second. We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? No? One more time, more discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.